Hi, I'm Amy Hawkins. We eat food every day, but many of us don't stop to think about where that food came from or what was done to it before we put it in our mouths. Did you know that today's average meal travels 1,500 miles before it reaches our tables? And a lot is injected into that food to preserve it along its long journey to our tables. Well, a new movement is underway to change that. The overall goal is to build a local food system in North Carolina that will provide more local food needs, provide greater access to fresh food, and protect the safety of our food. The goals also can protect more open space and our environment by relying less on food shipped here from across the country. But to accomplish these goals, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
The more we learned about the food system, the more convicted we became about changing it and in our own little way. And one of my little cliches is we were tired of food we were afraid to eat. And it's true, you know, became this real avid label reader. And if I couldn't pronounce it, it wasn't going in the buggy, you know, and I certainly wasn't going to eat it or feed it to our kid. And you know, more and more these days, it's harder to find, you know, food that is true to its origins or food that is not overly processed or preserved with things that God never intended us to eat.
Well, to me, local food is important because it allows me to have connections with people that are doing really important work. What I've found as I've tried to eat a local diet is that I've started building connections with people, and so now when I sit down to eat a plate of food, I actually can envision in my mind the people who grew it and be truly thankful for the work they're doing.
My partner Cassie and I have 10 acres over in eastern Lincoln County, and we raise primarily pasture-raised pigs, and we also do pasture poultry and ducks and some shiitake mushrooms. So it's a diversified little family farm, and we try and grow as much food as we can on that small piece of land. Restaurants and retailers make up about 60% of our overall revenue, and 40% comes direct to consumers. You know, we get to look people in the eye and tell them thanks, and you know, we get to feed our neighbors on a weekly basis, primarily through farmers markets.
I've actually gotten so involved that we ended up creating a company, my brother and I did, called Know Your Farms. And we go out to farms in the Charlotte area, and we pick up food from them and we bring them back to groups of people in Charlotte, Davidson. We have about 70 families that we work with right now.
Well, I think taste is important. We all know that that's probably the main determinant of what people eat more than the nutritional quantities in any particular food. And food that's grown locally and fresh tends to taste better than the canned spinach, say, that you may remember from school lunch days. Also, there's something I think very engaging to know where your food comes from, and to be able to go to the farmer's market. It's become a very social kind of atmosphere, and to know exactly who grew your food, where it came from. So I think those are greater benefits than, say, any particularly different nutrient composition. There may be a little bit of evidence that, say, organic food has some slightly higher nutrient levels, but if you think of the nutrition problems facing the U.S., it's really obesity much more than it is nutrient deficiencies. And if we can get people more excited about fruits and vegetables because they taste better and people know where they come from, I think that's going to have a bigger impact overall.
The food that you get in the grocery store is not always the same as the food you get from the farm. There's a lot in the form of labels that has come in between us and our food. So, for example, the term natural has been put on lots of labels. But what does that mean? And if you can't actually get to a place to see how they raise the food, then you don't really know. And they rely on us not knowing. They count on the fact that we are not knowing. And so we buy things thinking we're making good choices and are not necessarily. And that's even been seen with the organic label. The organic label has been used in cases by large-scale farming in ways that are inappropriate based on what I as a consumer might be assuming that label to mean. And so the only way to get around that is to actually create a more direct connection with the farms. And if the farms are close enough that I can get to them and can go see what they're doing, then I have confidence that I know what's happening there.
And I think the local economies, the worse that the global economy gets, the more we're going to have to return to decentralized economies of all types, especially around food. But the production of food touches our lives in so many different ways. This is the best way to start. Let's look at our food production and how can we improve that, and then from there, lots of other little pieces will benefit from that improvement and get to do their own sort of little revolution. I think that's where we are, not just with food, but our whole way of thinking and working together needs to be rethought. Every dollar that we spend with local growers stays in the community. It's a dollar that can be spent 7 times over in the local economy. It's not sent to China.
Preserving a local economy translates to lots of things that we value, from preserving the environment and thinking about climate change and how seriously we need to take that, to health disparities and access to fresh and local foods. If you think about the economic development potential, if every North Carolina citizen spent just 5% of their food dollar on sustainable local foods, that would be about 55 cents a day, and that would mean $1.7 billion for the local economy.
Generally speaking, it's still a bit higher cost, I think, to buy locally, because in order to make a fair return to the farmer, and because they're not benefiting from the economies of scale that have all kinds of other trade-offs in terms of energy and that sort of thing. But one thing to keep in mind is that in the U.S. we spend less of a proportion of our budgets on food than just about any country in the world. So we've gotten kind of spoiled and I don't know, accustomed to the fact that we don't pay very much for our food, and you could question whether that means we don't value our food and that we don't put a priority on that in terms of our health.
Young people don't have a lot of motivation, a lot of economic motivation to dive into farming as a livelihood, and we need to restore food production to its rightful place of honor and to ensure that the people who produce food are paid a fair price for their products. If we don't get our entire communities to care about farms, then there won't be any more.
The average age of producer now in North Carolina is 57, and we tie the nation for loss in our farms, tie for first. So there's a lot of reasons, even if you're not in agriculture, that putting your food dollar in local sustainable products is good for the state.
Support your local farmers markets. Those are a great way to do it. But then also look for things like what we're doing in the Charlotte area with our food clubs. When we bring food back from the farms, we provide an online ordering system so that you can go out and see what's available. We're trying to take some of that work out of it for you. Since I'm already doing it for myself, you can tap into that. If you don't live in the Charlotte area, you can create your own food clubs that do the same thing. There are plenty of examples across the state where they're doing that, meat buying clubs and things like that. So there are opportunities to tap into something else. You just have to get creative, and you have to be willing to kind of look and hunt around for it and ask for it.
The first thing we did was put together an advisory committee, and it's very broad spectrum. It's made up of about 77 people representing different aspects of the food system, from producers to processors to distributors to buyers to people in the health professional to county managers. And we're now having a series of regional meetings across the state to gather input and ideas. From those, we'll put together some working issues teams that will kind of drill down in various issues that emerge. We'll have a state summit March 2nd and 3rd, and it will result in a state action plan, and hopefully an ongoing process from then on to revise and rebuild and continue and implement. part of the action plan will be a local toolbox for communities to have ideas and ways for them to enhance the local production and consumption in their own community.
If we don't take steps at the legislative level to try to protect some of these things and make sure that there's incentives and make sure we're funding the things that are already in place to take care of those, then we can spend as much time as we want in creating a farm to fork movement, and it'll be moot because the transportation costs that are going to be involved in trying to get the food from these distant rural areas into the urban areas is going to be too great.
I mean, our land use policy is crucial. You know, in this area, we've seen the land values get so far out of reach that there's no possible way that a farmer could afford to purchase the land or that they could ever get the money back out of it. Cooperative extension has been really great at helping support growers and give us better tools to promote ourselves more effectively.
Cooperative Extension is a part of the outreach of North Carolina State University and North Carolina A&T State University. So we have access to resources, groups of specialists, and lots of different programs and research that are happening all over the state and the southern region, and so we have the opportunity to bring those individuals to Cabarrus County. We had a horticultural specialist here on Friday to talk about what vegetable and fruit crops might grow best at our new incubator farm. What we're going to do is the term incubator farm is like a small business incubator, and we're going to grow farmers. We're going to help people that think they want to learn how to farm, learn how to farm. And they're going to learn about taxes and insurance, as well as the soils and seasonality of fruits and vegetables. We're going to teach them about all of those different things that they need to know in order to be able to learn how to make a living farming. But it's a very exciting time in order to be able to look at growing those farmers to develop those local food systems.
You know, it's becoming easier because people are starting to make the connection between the quality of their food and the quality of their life. You know, whether it's their health or their well-being or, you know, time with their family or, you know, how the pleasure that they get out of a meal instead of it just being something to keep them from being hungry. It's something to, you know, it's just a little celebration 3 times a day.
I think the more people that get excited and get educated and get involved, the more traction we have and the more exciting things that'll come out of it.
I think probably, you know, in the future we're going to hopefully see more producers. We're going to see more farmers markets. We're going to see I'm hopeful that we see access to fresh local food in the schools, in the hospital, and in a variety of different places that we really need people to be eating healthy, because ultimately it is a health issue.
Well, I would love to see policies implemented that would make it easier to make some of these connections between the producers and the consumers, and of course one obvious place would be the schools. I think everybody knows that the schools really face a big challenge in terms of offering nutritious food. Unfortunately, they're really stuck by a lot of the budgetary constraints, and they're forced to essentially run as a business. So if you're running as a business, you'll probably choose to sell foods that kids will eat, which may not be broccoli and Brussels sprouts.
I would love for North Carolina to make a commitment to a certain percentage that we would move towards of local food in our local venues. If we said by 2020 we wanted to have 10% of the food that we bought produced locally, I think it would do a lot for our local economy and job creation and farmland preservation and all of those things.
Farmers markets are great, but they rely on farmers being pretty close to market. So what I think we need is to start rebuilding some infrastructure. Things like if you are an attorney, you know, studying up on agriculture and product liability law, so that you can offer that as a service to farmers in your area. If you're an insurance provider, looking at creating packages for these independent farms to have health care and retirement benefits so that we're attracting people into this profession that we might not be able to get otherwise. And if you're in packaging, if we can create cold storage locations. There are lots of things that are needed to create a distribution network and to create a thriving economy that allows the food to come from our local farmers.
Production to market was broken. In North Carolina, there's almost no place for local producers to get their animals processed and packaged in a way that would be appropriate for retail. We've lost all that infrastructure over the years. So it was seeing all that broken infrastructure in the middle. How do we do this here in North Carolina that kind of spawned this idea?
We had a meeting in October of 2007, where we had 175 agricultural producers come together at the request of the county commissioners, and they said, you know, we've got 9,000 head of beef cows in this county. We know local food is going to be a concern. Right about that time, there had been a big recall of meat around the United States, and people were really concerned about where their food was coming from. We can control somewhat, especially in the summer, our fruits and vegetables, but we don't have a lot of local meat produced. So the beef cattle producers said, you know, we want to be able to provide our meat locally to consumers, and consumers really want that personal knowledge of where their food comes from. So we went, you know, Max Cruz said, yes, we're interested in going after a grant, and we'll put in this harvest facility so that we've got local producers producing animals that will then be able to sell meat at the farmers market.
We really have got to band together and come up with ways where we can support each other instead of pushing each other away. And I mean, it's critical to our future. I mean, we're at a really important point right now to make some positive changes, or, you know, we won't have places to farm. We won't have people who want to. And, you know, we need to restore farming as a profession to its rightful place. I mean, we are growing food. Nobody can live without it.
If you would like to share your input about ways to build a local food economy here in North Carolina, then make plans to attend the Farm to Fork Summit in Raleigh. This summit will explore the outcomes of the 6 regional meetings and working issues teams, provide input about implementation, and help produce a statewide action plan for building a local food economy. The Farm to Fork Summit will be held March 2nd and 3rd at NC State University's McKimmon Center. Registration is required. To register for the summit or to learn more about the Farm to Fork initiative and how you can be involved, log on to www.cefsfarmtofork.com.